So if you've followed me at all or seen any of my videos or listened to me speak on one of the social audio apps, you'll know how important words are to me. Words really are the way we can communicate. But here's the problem, right? Here's the challenge, I guess, is a better way to say that, is that between my mouth and anybody else's ears is such a vast distance. Perhaps one of the greatest distances that we'll ever have to cross or to bridge, right? Because whatever comes out of my mouth flows from the abundance of my heart and from my brain. And in fact, you could say that if you took a figure 8, like an infinity sign, stood it on end, and you wrapped one half of it around your mind and the bottom half around your heart, it crisscrosses right about your vocal cords, right? So this mind and heart coherence flow together, constantly flowing, commingling, and then it crosses at your vocal cords, and out of your mouth, the Bible says, the abundance of your heart speaks. Now, there's a lot of times when we can pretend or we can act, and we can say things that we think but we don't necessarily feel. But what I'm trying to get at today is that when our mind and our heart are both engaged, and it comes out of our mouth, that's creative power right there. The Bible is very clear. In the beginning, it says, was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What an interesting way to describe God, to use the word as God, right? And I can't tell you if that's literal or symbolic or metaphorical or all of the above. But I do know that it's very intentional that God himself is describing himself as the Word. And it's not just words, it's the Word, right? And then it goes right into this creation story in Genesis where the world was without form and void. This is Bible language. And God speaks into existence light and darkness and day and night and land versus water and all of the things in creation. He speaks them into existence, right? So this is that indication that our words are really powerful. Our words create worlds. God demonstrated that himself by creating the world from chaos, right? From the swirling uncertainty and unknown, created something very tangible that we experience, in fact, including us. And again, this is not to tell you what to believe, this is just to understand why words are so important and why words are so powerful, right? And so I got to thinking about this recently, and I was picturing in my mind, in my imagination, and I invite you to do the same, this swirling void, right? There's nothing you can really pick out. There's no definition until God speaks the word, and then out of it comes something with form that can be recognizable and named and that we understand. And I think that's the same process on a much smaller scale that's going on in our hearts and our minds, is that there's this formless void swirling through our heart and our mind, and we don't really know exactly what it is that we're thinking or feeling until we vocalize it. Because when we vocalize it, we have to put a form to the formless. So we're actually creating, through our mouth, through our vocal cords, through our words, something that can be understood. Whereas when it's just swirling inside of us, there's really no definition. And I can't fully understand it, and certainly you can't unless I vocalize it. But as I stated earlier, now we've got this word that I have said, or words, that are defining the chaos inside of me to some degree. But then there's that chasm between my mouth and anyone else's ears. Because regardless of what I say and how careful I say it, whoever is listening will hear it with their own perception, with their own receiver, with their own filters. So it reminds me that words are really just containers. Words are symbolic. And the symbolism takes meaning because I pour my meaning into it. My perception, my understanding of what the words are, I pour that into the container, which is the sound, right? And then it has meaning to me. Not because of what the person intended, but because of the meaning I assign to it. This is really important to understand because so much confusion and chaos and relationship problems happen in this chasm between what I say and what you hear, and what you say and what I hear. And there's all sorts of conflict because I think you should understand and see and hear and experience my words in the way that I said them. But that's impossible because that's all from within me. The only way you can hear what I'm saying and make any sense of it is through your own experience, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own perceptions. And so you take my words, as you are doing right now, and you receive them and you process them through your filters, and you form a thought, an idea, a feeling inside of you, which may or may not be at all what I've intended. So this is an act of faith. This video right now is me releasing my thoughts and feelings into words, right? So I'm creating something that has a form, but then having to release the outcome because I don't know what you're going to think. And I can't force you to think anything or feel anything. And in fact, many people hear what I say and they misinterpret it based on what I was intending and get all upset about it. And I used to take that personally, right? I thought, how could you have missed, because I'm so careful in how I say things and how I write things, how could you have missed the meaning and interpreted it so far afield? And I just reminded again and again that people hear and receive a text or an email or a voicemail or a speech or a video in their own body, in their own understanding, in their own belief system, right? So what they receive, of course, will be highly personalized to them. And any speaker will tell you, or especially any preacher, that there are oftentimes you stand up in front of a congregation or an audience and you say what you intend to say, and you say it very carefully and passionately, and then someone come up to you afterwards, inevitably, and one of two things can happen. Well, several things can happen. One of two things often happen. One is somebody will say, how in the world could you say such a thing? That is so inappropriate. And usually then I'm kind of shocked, like, what are you talking about? And they'll explain what it is that they were offended by. And it had nothing to do with what I was intending. It is the words I said, but it's not what I meant. That's just the way they received it. And so then we have to repair that misunderstanding. And the opposite is true as well, where people will come up to me and say, boy, that thing that you said about the butterfly emerging from the cocoon, that hit me right where I wanted. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will pour back over my talk, my notes, and say to myself, I don't think I even mentioned a butterfly or a cocoon anywhere in this. So I just find it fascinating, right, that people hear what they'll hear regardless of what you say. Now that could be sort of self-defeating in some ways, to say, well, how in the world am I ever going to communicate anything to anybody if I can't control, right, or I can't even predict how it is they're going to receive it? That's an act of faith. It's an act of faith. It really is. Whether you believe in God or not, it's an act of faith. In fact, we walk by faith all the time, regardless of our belief system, right? But I have to believe that gravity is going to hold me to the ground, and that there will be air and water available to me, right? And that when the light turns red, everybody's going to stop. When the light turns green, everybody's going to go. There's a lot of things we do by faith, and communication is an act of faith. It's an act of creation, as we talked about, but it's also an act of faith, but it does invite for relationship. If you take the letter M, looks like this kind of, capital M, and it's the first letter in the word me. And if you look at it carefully, it looks like a fortress, right? And oftentimes, if I'm all about me, I'm hiding behind my fortress and I'm just keeping all comers out. My moat is filled, my drawbridge is up, and I'm defending my position, right? But that's not a really great way to have relationships for anybody that's not in my castle. But what if I flip that thing upside down? Then the M becomes a W, and the W is the first letter in the word we. That's a connection, that's a relationship. And look at this, it's actually open, it's receptive. It's like two cups, your cup and mine. We can commingle our ideas and perhaps create a new recipe. I've been in several conversations with people, dialogues, where we both came in with our own perception, our preconceived notions, our ideas, right? And we're sharing them, but we're sharing them with the idea, I want to be understood, but I also want to understand. In fact, St. Francis said, the best way to go is seek first to understand and then to be understood. That's a great formula for good relationships. But in these dialogues, sometimes with two people, sometimes more, when it's open and people are sharing their ideas open and freely without judgment, there's something that happens, something magical, where one idea and another idea meet somewhere in the middle, and because the energy is good, right, then it creates something new that neither one of us had thought about. In fact, I've been in conversations many times where I go, wow, I never thought of it that way before. And the other person says, neither did I, right? That's awesome. So there's the power of creation in the fact that I'm putting words to this swirling milieu of chaos inside of me, right? That's miraculous alone. But then when my words and your words commingle without defense, without the fortress, we can actually create something that neither one of us thought of, or at least not thought of it in that way. And I think of this in terms of sound waves, right? When I speak, I'm creating a sound wave. And if you put that on a graph, it goes up and down, right? And those pretty parabolas that we learned in math and wondered, what's the purpose of that, right? Why am I learning this? And I live close to the ocean. I'm not that far from the beach, and I've watched the waves many times. And here's what I learned in science and now I've seen in nature is that when two waves come together and they're in alignment, they're in perfect alignment, the amplitude of the wave actually increases when they meet. You see two waves come together, and when they meet, they combine the energy of the two waves. And it's not just like twice as high, it's exponentially high. And I don't know exactly how much, but that's pretty cool. But if the waves are perpendicular, if they're cross with each other, and my wave's going this way and yours is coming in like a T-bone, when they meet, that's a mess. In fact, they cancel each other out. My sound waves cancel out your sound waves, and then nobody hears anything. You see this all the time in social media. People shouting from the rooftops and nobody hears anything because we're crossing each other and we're canceling out the sound waves. So how much more productive would this process of living and creating together be if we get in alignment? What I'm not saying is that we have to agree on everything, right? You bring your ideas and I bring mine, and they're not the same, but they come together and create something new, and we both behold. It's like, wow, where did that come from, right? So I just want to point out that there is no English word communison. What we strive for, what we long for, what we're built for is community, unity, right? But a lot of people confuse community with agreement. But there is no word for communison. There is no word communison. I just made that up. Unison. And we get this confused in our minds that we think we're looking for community, but community in our minds mean we all agree. The pride end of my ego has decided I am right, and I'm not listening to anybody else, and I'm stuck in my fortress alone. But through grace and gratitude, I turn my M into a W and it becomes a we. And I sit in the seat of humility and I go, what else can I learn? Right? Maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong. If I was right, awesome. If I was wrong, teach me something new. And there's always more to learn, right? The only evidence of life is growth. So, all of this to say, through our words, the words that we tell ourselves, the words that we tell others, the words that we shout to God, whether in praise or in profanity, are creating something. They're creating the world that you live in, right? It's not manifesting externally things, although there's some evidence that can happen. But more importantly, it's manifesting my mindset, my heart set. So out of the abundance of my heart, my mouth speaks. And if you listen carefully to your words, your self-talk, you'll understand what your heart's really thinking, what your heart's really feeling, right? But you can adjust that. You're not at the mercy of that. You are responsible. You're able to respond. And you can change the words that you're listening to. You can change the words that you're saying. You can't change what anybody else thinks or feels about it. But with humility, gratitude, and grace, just pass it off into the hands of God. You don't have to take responsibility for what anybody else does, right? I'm only responsible for what's internal, not for what's external. So I invite you and me, right, to use our words carefully for life, for building up, not tearing down, right? For making someone's life better, including mine, right? And I say, if we have that much power in our tongue, and I believe we do, then let's use our words as weapons of mass construction. Are you with me?